You bright, I should have been.
Good one. Hotep, everybody. Greetings. This is Nawasha.
And this is a very
And this is Moncho.
tired Moncho. Antonio Guerra. What's up? Antonio Guerra, did you get those messages I sent you, brother?
It's Guerra.
Guerra. Saeed Uluvala, what's happening? Azali.
So happy Monday, everybody. We hope you enjoyed your weekend.
Black Love Live Mondays. This is our new flow right here. Renee Biko. Saeed Uluvala said we gonna fight. I got you. You in line too. You about fourth in line. It's like 5, 6 brothers.
He's right.
Want to talk to you on the same thing. Antonio, did you get that thing I sent you, brother? I'm gonna talk to you after this. Mike Ingram, peace, bro.
Yeah,
so, this is our new schedule. So we want you to really
Happy Monday.
if you can join us to talk about Black love and all of the aspects of the art and science of Black love culture. We are now doing Mondays at 9 p.m. or shortly thereafter, somewhere between 9 and 9:30. So we are in our regular comedic stupor that we're usually in. I am extremely tired, but I'm motivated by your presence and this conversation. This was something that Nawasha really wanted to bring to the fore because of some information that she was looking at recently and just some stuff we were seeing from our friends and family out there in Facebook world.
And also our clients.
And our clients. I know that in the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've been blessed to meet and be introduced to a lot of good people, couples and singles. Dr. Patton, what's up? We've been blessed to be to meet a lot of good people, and this casual sex conversation has come up often. And
so we know whatever's a conversation for a few people,
right,
is normally a conversation for all of us.
Right.
So we figured we'd just bring it up this Monday.
Right.
But as usual, if there's ever anything that you want to talk about when it has to do with love and relationships, just inbox us and that'll go on the list.
Right. So we talking about casual sex. This is a very, very emotionally charged subject. It's a very polarizing subject. And it is a subject of much anticipation, opinion, etc. So we want everybody to chime in, enlighten us with your perspectives and what you have to offer.
Yes.
Okay. Stacey Patton, we love you. Black Queen.
Yes, we do.
Pushing
Still
that
the
book.
best
Pushing
book
that book. I think you closing out. You closing out. You got one more month. Unless there's an incredible book that comes out in the next couple weeks. Stacey Patton wrote the best book of 2017, according to Moncho and Nawasha of the Code House Initiative. So, in any event, let's get into it. So
we want to start out with a question of what was your introduction to sex? Because that's so important to what we are going to talk about with what is casual sex, and then how you've actually interacted with it, whether it's in the culture, just, existing, whatever your experiences have been, or if it's actually been a part of your relationships and how. So we're starting from the beginning with what we're saying introduction to loving intimacy. So when you first recognize that, it's probably between the ages of 7 and 14. So what is your introduction to love?
We tired as hell, too.
I'm not tired.
I'm tired.
That's the proverbial we.
Yeah. If I'm tired, we tired.
But anyway, so you can start out with thinking about that, and then chiming in on the conversation.
And we're talking about willing sexual, not those of us that were introduced to sex in perverse ways. We're not talking about that. I'm one of those. We're talking about the beginning of your willing interaction with sex. Okay, Rich Lefward, What's up, brother? Stacey said playing house. Okay, so that's definitely one that
house.
So we obviously we like to talk about the spiritual cultural, and I think that's very interesting what Dr. Patton said, because typically in our culture, children were introduced to sex in play, and usually in the ages of 7 to 14. We would take a 7-year period to prepare a child for sexual understanding, from the play level all the way to the more serious understandings and the introduction to the anatomy, the purposes of sex. And by the time they were 14, really entering their pubescence, when their hormones are raging and they are beginning to really have the urge to interact sexually, they're well educated about the intricacies and the intimacies of sex. And so I think that's an excellent approach. We actually, our daughters are now 7 and 8, and we have actually begun to talk to them about sexuality and what it means and how it works. Because what I find is interesting is that almost by automation at that age, they're being introduced to words and to concepts from their friends, and touches improper and not, or I like this and I like that. So I like this boy, or this boy said I'm cute, or he likes me. So that's interesting. So we definitely agree with that ancient system, and we would invite all of you to consider introducing your children to the concept around 7, and then walk them up the ladder until they're 14. And by the time their puberty is really raging, they're well aware of what's going on. But let's get into, and let's talk about spiritually what our culture, our ancestors say.
So what are the purpose? Sex. What are the purposes of sex?
Right. Oh, you asking me? Okay, yes. So according to...
So spiritually, there were two purposes for sex.
Yes.
And that is part of what you would learn in a rite of passage.
Right.
Beginning before, like Mansho said, before you have the urge or the physical opportunity for full sexual expression, especially between two peers. So we're talking about, again, the loving energy or the curiosity that happens between peers. You knew
Randy,
the purpose of sex. So the first purpose of sex... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're already talking. You might as well finish.
I'm visual. I'm always stimulated by what I see. Okay. Including sexually. And I'll get to that in a minute. Not me, but just the visual modality in terms of sexuality. But according to our culture, our classical culture, there are two purposes for sex. I'm sure everyone obviously knows that one of them is the procreation of life, that bringing forth those 144,000 aspects of character that we call the human body. They are manifested in a female slant or a male slant that we call our eyes, our nose, our lips, etc. But it is really aspects of character that are the manifestation of God coalesced in 144,000 aspects that manifest in a combination that is unique to you, that is called you. So you are bringing forth the perpetual manifestation of God, or life, birth. So that is the first, or that is one aspect of sexuality. That is actually the second one. The first and primary is spiritual connection and the mind expansion on the highest level. So the way I say it a lot of times to our clients is that sex is the highest form of communication. So we hear often that communication is the number one issue in relationships. And I would agree that it is, because communication exists on 7 planes and it's multifaceted. But what is the highest level of communication, intimate communication? It is the synergy of your mental, spiritual, and physical connection that we call sexuality. So it is the highest form of activity, of prayer, of just communion with spirit. It is the only act that brings forth life.
Right.
And it is the highest and most intimate level of interaction that you can have with another human being.
And this is why there is no such thing as casual sex. Because we're going to go we're going to go over the points of sex. But the first is that it's spiritual. So it's not really something that you would take casually, knowing that it could represent bringing forth new life. This is how powerful and amazing sex energy is, that you wouldn't even exist. You wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for this amazing experience.
Right.
But the second purpose of sex is for you to really come to communicate or come to understand that you have a purpose. So we always talk about the signs of soulmating. Right. You have a unified purpose with the person that you're having sex with. Ideally, that's your soulmate, and you are groomed at that age of rite of passage to understand the purpose of sex could bring new life. To understand that's the physical representation of what you're creating, but there's also the mental creation that you have, the spiritual creation that you have, an emotional creation that you have. So this is what's happening that can never really be casual. Now we call things casual sex.
Right. This
because
is the
it's
cognitive
just
dissonance that we have.
It's an expression that makes us feel comfortable, but what I always say about sex energy is that I think the perversion of sex energy is our noticed deficit of our spirituality. Right. So because we want purpose and we want, divine connection and divine communication, what's actually happening is we are searching for it in the one distant memory that we have, which is our sexual power and sexual energy. Right. So what happens is it gets distorted, perverted, abused, like many things, like food, like drink, like everything. We kind of can go with a slant that leads towards destruction, So in casual sex, there is no casual sex. But the first thing that you would learn spiritually is that there are two purposes for sex. So the first purpose, we all know that you could possibly have a child. But I would say that there is still your emotional children that you create, your spiritual children that you create, in addition to the actual physical children. So you have to be mindful, even if you're using so-called protection, there's not a lot of protection for like we say, the spiritual, spiritually transmitted diseases or the emotionally transmitted diseases that we're coming across.
How do you distinguish the difference from comfort and purpose? Mike, that's an excellent question.
That is a great question.
I think, as therapists or just people who study our people, what you're going to find if you look at black people, and you'll find this if you look at in American culture, is three main ways that we cope. I would say four, but three main ways that we cope and we seek to get our emotional needs met, because there are the things that drive our behavior. So our need for comfort or satisfaction is done in three main ways that I see. We do it through food, we do it through sexuality, and then we do it through drugs, or we could even say entertainment / drugs. And what is happening is that with sexuality, one of the problems with the way we're experiencing sexuality, one, we're over-sexualized, we're overstimulated without real profound understanding about sexuality. So it's like we're being titillated and tantalized, but we're not being enlightened about how to use this power, how to master it, or how we can share it, right? So that's one. Number two, we because we are in an environment where most of the time we feel discord, we feel emotional discord. We use the things that are most readily accessible to us to create that feeling of comfort, that feeling of peace. And the number one thing we do is food. And I know Nawasha talked about this year, as we were coping with the loss of our son. We
Yes,
literally,
the worst diet I've had.
we literally have eaten out. Sometimes we've eaten out like 4 times a week, and we never do that. But this year we've eaten together as a couple the worst that we have ever eaten in the damn near 20 years that we've been together. So Queen Afua, Dr. Africa, all of our teachers that are out there, oh man, we off our seat. So we have to get back
That's
on our
prime
seat.
for a comeback.
But we use food to cope. We didn't even necessarily use sexuality to cope as much because we were eating separately and together at times and with the children. But the point is that for our people, what I see, and especially dealing with my clients, especially dealing in the last 25 years when I'm looking at people, the way they're using sex, Dr. Africa, again, we always talk about our 5 or 6 main teachers, and Dr. Africa is one of them. He told me something many years ago that I see. He said, the way we're approaching sex is that we just use our partner to masturbate. And it's really profound when you think about it. How he broke it down to me is that it really doesn't matter sometimes who the person is, because the way we're exchanging with them in our mind, it has really nothing to do with them. We're using them to get to a level of comfort that we have associated with sex. And we can do that casually. We can do that disconnected in terms of what they even about, what they on, what their desires are, what their dreams are. We're exchanging a high level of spiritual energy, but we really don't care because we're not seeking high levels of spiritual enlightenment. Even when we're in a couple, sometimes a committed couple, casual sex happens in intimate relationships that are committed, especially long-term relationships, because we, again, use sex as one of the primary things to get our feelings of comfort, to get our feelings of significance, definitely to get our feelings of variety, love and connection. So when you look at the 6 human needs, a lot of times if you've been with somebody for a long time, like we've been together for almost 20 years, you can tell when your partner is like, look, this don't really have a lot to do with you. I just need this right now. So can you put that work down or whatever you're doing?
I think that there's space for loving service, which, the truth is that you're never disconnected. So we don't acknowledge our connections. But I think, this is evidence of a lot of where our culture is. So if you're here in any westernized culture, but definitely in the United States, there's a lot of evidence of dysfunction when it comes to sex. Right. So either I know that children can come this way and I'm still creating children that I'm really not prepared for. And I'm not even saying financially. I'm saying spiritually, emotionally prepared for, or that I don't want to have with this particular person. I'm not even thinking about the possibility of that. And we all know how children are coming into, the world. So we're calling for them spiritually and emotionally, and we're not disconnected because it's still happening. So that divine source that is, bringing forth the next life, the new life, returning ancestors, whatever you want to say, that energy is still with us. We're just not aware of it. So like we say, the conscious, the unconscious, and the subconscious, this is where you get your spiritually transmitted diseases. Right. So what's happening is there's a focus on sexually transmitted diseases that are physical. And we talk about condoms and we talk about, tests and trying to figure out where someone has been and what someone has and that type of thing. But the truth is that same level of conversation should really be happening with who you are emotionally and spiritually. So when we're saying spiritually again, we're talking about your mind, your emotion, your heart energy, and then we're saying that you are manifesting as a physical embodiment of that. So when we're talking about, hey, how many people have you been with? What have you been diagnosed with that we can share the same language about and use certain words? We need to think the same thing about, is this person an emotional vampire that I'm with? Are they neglectful? Right. And literally, like when we talk about a sexually transmitted disease, literally, so now this is on the physical level, moving from the spiritual, you are exchanging your DNA with another person. So that, again, cannot be casual. You're literally exchanging body fluids with one piece of your hair is encoded with your DNA, let alone the level of fluids that we exchange when we're having sex. It's a very, very
intimate exchange. And there are some really powerful questions that are coming up. And I like this one from Rakia Jackson that says, I have read that ancient African warriors only had sex 4 times a year. It was a purpose or a gateway for life and higher spiritual awareness. And definitely, there is truth to that. We did a video some time ago talking about, again, Dr. Afrika, and I would always suggest that you look at African Holistic Health as one of your top 10 books that, like we have a group of books that we strive to read every year in totality, or we read from them every year to replenish our ideas and to make sure that we are still on the path of the purpose of our relationship. And African Holistic Health, to me, is in my top 5 relationship books. The chapter that Dr. Afrika has in there on African Holistic Health, on African Holistic Sex, will blow your mind, from the sexual personalities to why some people say and some people say ooh, some people breathe in and some people all of that. Randy. But one of the things he taught us in person was that a simple way to talk about, now we're extremely over-sexualized, and our sexual introduction as a culture has come from our oppressors. So many of the things that we do and that we are really into are not actually our ancient way. And I'll just say one of them is open mouth kissing. That is attributed to the French. So we call it French kissing today, but it's not something that our ancestors ever did. And it is not something that we look upon because it causes overstimulation and a bunch of other reasons why it's not a practice.
Another, exchange of body fluids.
Right. That we do very casually. I see people on TV just meeting and they kiss and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, to answer Rakia's question, or to address her question, Dr. Afrika talked about I don't know where he got this system from, but I've read it a couple of times. I don't know the eldest origin. It doesn't even matter. But the point is, how frequently should we be having sex? Even in an intimate couple, like Nawasha and I are, you're committed, you're married, etc. I think most of us would agree in their honest moments that we are very over-sexualized and we're having sex. We're using sex for other than what it's supposed to be. And as a result, the sex is whack. When you have sex a lot, it's like when you eat the same thing over and over again, it starts to lose its specialness. And anything that is abused or overused starts to lose its purpose and the potency of it. But Dr. Afrika said to take your age, right? And what was the formula he said? To take your age and divide it in half, right? That was it? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. It's to take your age, divide it in half, and that is the number of days that you will probably experience the most potent sexual experience. Now, for some of us, that's like...
But
now, if you're in a couple, you're going to have to find a balance because you might not be the same age.
Being really ready for sex involves part of your cultural experience. So what is your diet? We see a lot of commercials for so-called performance dysfunction and, sexual dysfunction, whether that is, you don't have a desire or you actually don't think you can maintain the physical act of sex. And some of that comes from what we're eating, our stress and all of the other factors. So this is an ideal situation where you're healthy, where you're eating the right indigenous foods, where your mental space is taken care of, your emotional space is taken care of. So this is the idea of ejaculating and injaculating. What you really should do to expel or expend, some energy is different from all types of sexual energy. So sometimes you are just connecting. So that's some of the rituals that we suggest to people and have done in our relationship. But that is, eye gazing or just intimate touch, so you can do intimate touch. You can do, so many other things that are not the expression of, ejaculating or injaculating for neither of those purposes. Right. What happens is that we're talking about stress reduction and stress management. On a scientific level, the parasympathetic nervous system is what is activated. So that is your relaxation, or that is your pause. So what happens is we're using sex in order to get a break from the stressful life that we have. Right. So there's nothing wrong. That's your understanding that's what's happening in your physical body, is that you're going to sometimes be accelerating and then sometimes be relaxing or putting on the brakes. But the idea is we are in such a stressful state that we don't understand how to put ourselves at ease without using drugs, food, narcotics, alcohol, and sex. So the problem is not sex, it's not, it's that we're not managing our sexual energy. So what happens is when you're stressed, and then I'm going to have sex and release. This is the first time I get to connect with the divine. This is the first time I get to relax and, instantly be connected and connected to everything and connected to nothing. Like this idea of true freedom, even if it only lasts for a couple of seconds, that you're like, hey, I don't know how to do this on my own. I don't know how to relax. I don't know how to meditate. I don't know how to, let this energy go.
I
don't know how to have this energy go from my root chakra all the way up to my crown. I really don't know how to have that. So when you're sometimes talking about warriors or people who were trained to hold energy for different reasons, then you're saying that sometimes people would say, I'm cultivating this energy for extra physical strength.
Right.
I'm cultivating this energy for spiritual strength. I understand the purpose of sex and what is happening from the mental, emotional, and physical levels.
Right.
But I'm not only in the physical. We're in the physical a lot in a lot of our addictions and dysfunction. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like, not to use the word addiction is a negative, has a negative connotation, like you don't have control. But I sometimes wonder what it would be like if we were on other things the way that we are on the physical. When it comes to food, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to a lot of the things that we are relying on, I wonder how it would really be if we were, not addicted, but I'm going to use that word, but like addicted to meditation or addicted to positivity or empowerment.
Again, this is where cultural, Mike is asking an excellent question. This is where our cultural influences come in. We are leaning to sex. You could get the same level of satisfaction from, yoga, Aryan. You could get it from sports, and a lot of men are getting high levels of stimulation satisfaction through watching games, going to games, and playing various sports. Dance, I came up in the hip hop and house culture. Like being in a shelter in New York, man, it was like, you are, it is an ecstasy type of experience, without using any ecstasy or any drugs. Just the music. And so I think that what happens is, my good friend Kafele has said something one time about one of the reasons why the music has always stayed in our culture through our ma'afa, even though we lost a lot of other things, is because there's an eroticism to it. So when you play music around black people, just look at the way we move. The movements are very similar to our sexual energy. So everything has been sexualized because this is one of the ways that our oppressors are controlling us. They use sexuality to keep us at bay, to keep us distracted and whatnot. So I think your point was excellent, because we could find this kind of euphoria about a lot of shit, but we are doing it about sex because we're not leading, we're being led. So on television, I mean, look at the type of commercials where they attach sexuality to things, and then we take on sayings like sex sells and stuff like that.
But I was just reading, let me just add this point because you're mentioning it, but I think that what you said, like about ecstasy, I think that that's really amazing. So let me just because I happen to have this book super close to me. This is how the Moncho said that I'm like an old woman because all my books look like this. I'm going to do a picture and share a picture. But I don't even know if you can see this. I love getting fun, beautiful Post-its. And this is how I flag all of my books. So you'll see I'll have 1 million Post-its, and all of my favorite books look like this. But I just was reading this book from Shola Arewa. Let's see, it's Energy for Life. But inside of this book, she had a great point, and we had this conversation because I just was on the trip with her, her trip.
Somebody said transformation they found their copy of African Holistic Health.
The Transformation Vacation in the summer. We were in a group of women. We were in Barbados, but we just had this conversation about why people call alcohol spirits and drugs ecstasy. Like this idea, this longing for these things. It comes out in our word choice. So it's really interesting that we, kind of lean on spirits and ecstasy and the idea of really, again, wanting to connect with divine energy. I forgot which point I was going to pull out here. Oh, so Marsha was talking about how sex sells. And I was just reading the myth of Oshun as the temptress. So how she came to really get Ogun back to help humanity back to civilization in order for him to do his work, right? So it was the idea of the fact that, and this is a Yoruba myth or a Yoruba story, but the idea that we kind of use the woman as the temptress for a lot of things. So we make jokes about it all the time. Used to see old school videos where the woman is in a bikini and the dude, whoever he might be, is in a coat with a hat and Timberlands, especially like in this area. Right. If you're in New Jersey or New York, he's going to have a full coat on. And these are some of my favorites too that I used to love when I was younger. And I'm like, why is the woman in a bikini? And something doesn't look right there. But the woman is the temptress in selling. It's just a matter of what is she selling. So many times, culturally and spiritually, we have used the allure and the magic and the beauty of women to call people. So that's other women, children, men, to be attracted, to be led to their duty, to their job. But right. Now it's just like, hey, you should buy this car. Right. Hey, you should buy this pack of cigarettes.
It's American.
Hey, you should.
Yeah.
We're going to use the temptress for anything. And it's getting to the point where, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but it gets to the point where women are tricked that now women's empowerment has to actually be only about sex. Right. Or it's about a distorted version of sex. Like I will just take on whatever abuse has happened to me. I will now abuse myself first, or I will now parade
to prove that
in order to prove that I have control over the situation.
Yeah. So I want to address Mike's comment because we got so many other comments coming in, but he made a good comment a minute ago. So Mike, I'm coming back to you, brother.
I'm going to put up this Oshun temptress though.
First, he said, sorry for all the questions. We definitely want you to ask questions, so ask some more. When the emotion leaves after ejaculation, what does this say? Is that the purpose of sex? Meaning that I need to go home. That's a good question. And culturally, I don't think
the emotion ever leaves.
Yeah, culturally, this is something that, we do this workshop in the summer called The Heat of Love, and it's about emotional intimacy and sexuality. And in the heat of love, we ask people in the room, we ask the men, raise your hand if, you have an orgasm every time you have sex. And the men raise their hand. And then we ask the women, raise your hand if you have an orgasm when you have sex. And the women raise their hand. And then we define, it's usually not a lot of, it's not as many women as men. But then we redefine the term orgasm. And this speaks to your point, Mike. Culturally speaking, from our cultural paradigm, you have three things. You have an ejaculation, which is the climax of a man. You have an ejaculation, which is the climax of a woman. But an orgasm is something totally different than what we have been taught. An orgasm is the simultaneous peak. It is the uploading from the woman, from the man, and the downloading from the man to the woman, and he's uploading as well. So it is an equal exchange that is only going to happen if we have a true orgasm by the African standard. And that African standard, peace, Queen Vera, that African standard is that orgasm is really the simultaneous climax. So once we explain that, then we ask again, because usually in the room, the men are like 90% saying, it's always some dude in the back lying, saying, yeah, I don't have orgasms. Only you lying. What you know, you're not lying actually, but what you know as an orgasm, what you believe an orgasm is. And then we ask the women, that ranges anywhere from 20% to, up to 70%. And then we redefine by an African, the African paradigm, what an orgasm actually is. And then it almost is always never in the room. And that's very interesting because it speaks to your point, Mike. Sex a lot of times is not gratifying because of, now the actual act is, but I'm saying spiritually a lot of times it's just like sugar. You eat a donut and then you have a sugar crash. Well, a lot of times we engage in what we call casual sex, and there's always a pendulum swing. So every action has a reaction. And so whatever you do, there's a reaction to it. And I see that a lot of people who try to justify casual sex as being good and healthy for them, and you can't tell me what I'm doing, and all those types of things. What you'll see a lot of times when you deal with them with their intimate psychology is that there is always, it becomes an addiction, as you were saying, Nawasha. It becomes an addiction because you need that fix to deal with the emptiness that comes after this letdown of engaging in this high level spiritual act, but not getting any high level spiritual charge or intimacy or emotional fulfillment out of it. So when you do that, you have to start to rationalize to yourself that this act is not worthy of that, and not necessarily your behavior or your approach.
So that I think when you're talking about emotion, it's really, so if we talked about the spiritual, a little bit about the cultural, a little bit about the physical aspects of sex and why that can't really be casual. But the emotional aspect of sex is that really, I think sexual energy and this tune in to the divine, whether you're talking about the divine in yourself, the divine reflection in your partner, or truly a unified soulmate experience and the divine. What happens with emotional energy, the emotional part of sex, is that sex is so powerful, it is just going to amplify whatever your emotion is. So a lot of times we're going to sex in order to get the fix. But the truth is that if you're sad, it's going to amplify sadness. If you're angry, it's going to amplify anger. If you're happy and joyful and blissful, then that's what's going to be amplified. But the energy is so powerful and I think pure. So in a way that is like, we're not really comfortable, or we don't have a lot of practice dealing with our own energy or the energy of others. So like truly the vibration of the universe and the subtleties of the universe. So what happens is we go into sex kind of like we go looking for, other drugs, that this is going to be the fix. And sometimes it doesn't live up to it, but it's really only magnifying and amplifying whatever your emotional state already is.
Right.
And we talk about emotional fitness a lot of times. We were just joking today about the fact that people can only say, I'm sad, mad, glad, bad.
Men, I see
you
that
have
with men
a protracted, range of what your emotions can be. So what happens is we're not even sometimes aware of our emotional state. And this is why you have emotionally transmitted diseases again, because you're not aware of what you have going on right now. And there is going to be an exchange. So at the minimum, if you're just saying sex is an exchange, spiritually, physically, mentally, culturally, you're emotionally, if you're not aware of what you have, just like on the physical level, when we're saying, hey, you should get tested and you should do all these other things, you need to check in with yourself and all of those other levels too, because the disappointment happens for women too. When you're talking to a group, and sometimes people come together, right, a man and a woman, and you're like, who's had an orgasm? And the man is like, and the woman's sitting there like, then you're looking at each other.
Right.
Like, hey, I thought that it was something other than what it actually is.
There's a study that said that men, even the approach that we have to sex comes from enslavers. And so the terminology that the man culture has on the street, I killed it, I beat it up, all of these different things comes from the people that enslaved us.
That's terrible.
And that's what we say. That's
and I know it's not meant, but it's sometimes unattractive.
Many of the women take it on. I want somebody to beat it up. I want somebody to kill it. All of that kind of stuff. That really just comes from our enslavers. But what I think is interesting is I read a study many years ago about how men, very virile and strong men can have sex with women for hours and she not reach a climax. And then that same woman can masturbate for like 7 minutes and reach a climax. What is the difference? She knows how to unlock her emotional roadmap to ecstasy. And in order for you to reach that, with the average woman, it's a little different today, but with the average woman, it's still the same. In order you to reach that, there is a methodology that you have to employ to do that. That is not something you can do casually because it requires a level of intimacy. So a lot of the women who pretend that they advocate casual sex, ask them about their level of sexual fulfillment, and you will almost find a high level of frigidity. They are looking for sex in a way because they are now becoming sexually cynical about the possibility of any man providing the type of deep pleasure that they seek. But you ain't going to get that from that kind of relationship. The only way you're going to reach them higher levels of emotional fulfillment is in an emotional relationship. You can't do that. You know what I mean? And so,
yes, assault.
So,
exactly.
It is assault. So,
But I think that this is another point that we were also talking about today. Is we talk often about the differences between how women are experiencing culture and being taught, and how men are. So even though we're not officially having a rite of passage, we are experiencing culture and being taught in gender-specific ways some of the time. So when it comes to, a point that often comes up for men, like the first question that we ask, what is your introduction to sex? When did that happen? When you were in the 7 to 14 age range? A lot of people, a lot of men and a lot of women, but a lot of men say that they were shown pornography. So either from a peer, an older sibling or cousin or uncle, even a parent sometimes, like maybe you found your parent's stash, or maybe somebody actually gave it to you again, which is crossing the line a little bit, because we said in the beginning, like, what is a positive, peer introduction to love and sex. But sometimes what you're seeing from the culture, whether it's music, now you have, 24/7 videos, you have cable, you have the internet, so you can get a lot of access, compared to maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Definitely.
So I have some young women who have told me Actually, one of the children, the daughters, she's an adult now, she's 18, but one of the daughters of my best friend was like, hey, I was in class, and in the middle of class one day, I heard like some sounds of sex in the middle of class, and this is in high school. And she was saying that somebody was watching pornography on their cell phone, and she just happened to be like bombarded with it while she was doing classwork. So it's like some of the things that might have taken more effort, to get to before, like pornography or like, introduction that way, can be coming not from your household, not from your own phone, not from anything that you're necessarily doing, but you're bombarded with it. And I think that there's a violence and an aggression that comes in sex with certain types of pornography. So you can see it in the language again. What are you really aiming to do? Are you talking about anything about enlightenment or spirituality or connecting? Or are you just saying that my whole existence is in my performance and I'm aiming to live up to the first porno that I ever saw?
Right.
And now I'm addicted to that. So it just becomes like however this woman is whatever the scene is, however this woman is, however people are talking, that is now what I'm modeling, instead of really taking a young person through sexual relationships, even talking about the parts of the body. And like you mentioned, Dr. Africa, but the sounds and the areas of different organs. And, we went through a course on healing sexuality. So what position to do to heal certain organs.
Right. It's amazing.
It is amazing, but that's
amazing.
How much power is in sex, that you can say a true orgasm can heal your organs if you're saying if you're breathing the right way, in the right position, and making the right sounds, that you're using that as a prescription. So you're saying that this is what we have.
African Holistic Health book.
And
get
course,
the updated version. Somebody said that they have the book, but you have to get that, I think that fourth or beyond version, because he really added a whole chapter on communication and sexuality. But we did the course that was like a year long or something like that.
It kind of came with a supplement that was about, communication and sexuality. Actually, a whole module, if you will, like a course of study just about sex.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really amazing because we do some of it on a subconscious or unconscious level. Like when we say we're in different positions and we want a different thing, it's just like when you look to eat. And you're saying, hey, I'm thirsty. That was a perfect segue to drinking. But if you're saying, hey, I'm thirsty, I'm getting some water. I want a particular fruit smoothie, apple, grape. Sometimes it's the unconscious call for the nutrients or minerals or vitamins of whatever we're eating.
She has the third edition.
The same thing happens with sex. So on a unconscious level,
not sure.
You're looking for a certain position, you're looking for a certain healing expression or a certain release or a certain contribution from your partner. And that's why you end up in the positions that you're in or in the scenario that you're in. But I think when we have the cultural influence that's coming from, stress, oppression, enslavement, abuse, violence, aggression, pornography, those things come in unconsciously and subconsciously also. And I think that the evidence again is always in your relationships. Like we have a higher divorce rate as Black people in America than the 50% average. So the 50% average is pretty bad. Saying that you're entering into something with love and the intention for purpose and, divinity. And most people are going for some type of spiritual union or the presentation of a spiritual union, either religious or something. But that even 50% of those marriages don't endure. They're not fulfilling. So no matter how long they last, they're not fulfilling. And then we as Black people, we're up to like 60s to 70% of our relationships are not enduring.
Right.
And those are the people with the intention to endure, for better or for worse.
We're sexually active.
But we are still having babies, and we have to say again, what is the spiritual children, whether you have physical children or not, you are creating every time you're coming together that way. So now you have to make the decision, what do I want to create? And then you have to think back, what did I create when I have these I know a lot of women speak about attachments to men that they've had sex with that they want to sever. So, clipping those emotional, spiritual cords that you have because someone is in your mind or in your emotions, or literally you feel them in your body. So sometimes women are more aware of the literal DNA exchange and the emotional exchange, and sometimes men don't recognize it because of our anatomy. Right. So a lot of times men don't feel like there's an exchange. They feel like they're making a deposit, but there is still an exchange when you're skin to skin, vaginal fluid to, penile fluid, whatever you want to say, whether it's the kissing, those are exchanges of people. And I used to see, I forget the person's name. What was her name? I used to see a wonderful picture back in the beginning of social media and the internet.
With the people coming out of that person.
It was a loop. So it was people in a sexual position, but they were in a loop. And I'm going to find this poem too and put it in the comments. But it was a small poem. Basically, the last line came out to be, I don't want to ever have sex with someone I wouldn't want to become. And the idea was that you're exchanging fluids with someone that you then take and becomes a part of you. So if you say, hey, the idea that you're sleeping with everybody I ever slept with, it's true to some extent, because you're saying that foreign substance is now inside of my body and becoming a part of me. And I thought it was such a great poem. It was just a picture of like the chakra points, or the major chakra points, but two people in a face-to-face sexual lock. But the idea that you're having this energy going a loop between the two of you. So you have your 7 points of the chakra, or the major chakra, and then the other person does too. And now you just have this sexual loop once you actually are physically penetrated or connected in that way. But it was a great poem about the exchange, the spirit, the emotion, and the woman saying, I would never want to have sex with someone, or don't ever have sex with someone that you really don't want to become. And it's that idea of taking on the person's spirit, taking on the person's physical body, taking on the person's emotions, and that sex is magnifying whatever the emotion is. That if you don't want that, if you don't want more of that, then don't enter into it, because you're working with the most powerful energy that there is.
So the challenge for us is, first of all, I want to say to everybody, like, if you ever have had irresponsible sex like I have had in my life, that's funny that I coughed.
Talk about the unconscious and the subconscious. You're like,
I want to say that, you have to forgive yourself. You have to practice forgiveness, and you have to elevate your understanding. As African people, we're not putting anyone in purgatory, and we don't believe in the concept of punishing you. You have a self-accusing spirit, and when you're out of balance. So when you find yourself out of balance, the goal is just to get back in balance. It's not to be guilty or not to project blame. It's just to take the responsibility to get back to where you are supposed to be. So, I would just say that if you have been a person who's engaged in irresponsible or casual sex, because that is the synonym for casual when it comes to sexuality, irresponsible. So if you have engaged in that, we can help you begin to practice emotional forgiveness, and we have some rituals that you can do. So please contact us for that, because we want you to unload that emotional weight that some of these religions and some of this double standard this double standard society puts on you, that you get a certain amount of significance for being sexually free and proficient, but then at the same time you get demonized, whether you're men or women, for being sexually free. And so it's a very convoluted and condescending and confusion based ethos that we get in the society. So we can help you with self-forgiveness, and then to extend that to any other person who you have had contact with. But I think that, as we're looking at sex emotionally and how we're using it emotionally to pacify us in our pain, whether we're in extreme trauma or whether it's just boredom and discomfort, on a base level, that sexuality, like, it gets us out of that. We get it off and we feel good, and so we use it for that. I find it always interesting when we talk to people they talk about, a lot of times we take couples through their history so that they can see if there's any patterns. And like, we ask, like, who usually initiates sex more first, and how do they usually do it? Is it a very playful way? Is it a very domineering way? Because it tells you a lot about the psychology of the person. Sexuality is a thing that, when you listen to when you see a person's style and the way that they emanate sexually, if they're visual, if they're auditory, if they really are into the kinesthetic part of it. I remember being at a certain phase of my life that I couldn't differentiate physical intimacy, closeness, and sexuality. So, like, if you were around me physically, like we're together and like this, that equates sexuality to me. Even if we're not actually having penetration intercourse, it was sexual energy to me. And it was a while in my development before I was able to understand that some people are kinesthetic and they like the energy. So, like, I would see and still see young people today, like the young lady might like the dude, and she likes the young man, and they kicking it or whatever, and she's like physical, and he's like, yo, she off me, like, yo, she want me, you know what I mean? Where she may just be a kinesthetic type of person, or if a man is very kinesthetic and touchy-feely, a woman will say a lot of times, well, I don't know if you think this is leading to some sexuality or something. And sometimes we do, but sometimes it's just that energy. But I think that what's important that we talk about the emotional way that we're using sexuality, because it is what's really hurting us. And we're bringing children in. This is the most important thing. And I have lived with this in my life. You're bringing children in at the exact frequency of the emotional, psychological synchronicity or connection that you entered that sex act with. That's the thing that really, really, really shows you the impact of casual sex. The mentality that you go into the sex act with a person who is casual, and then you end up having children with them, because I have done that. That child becomes the manifestation of that emotion. And it becomes a theme in their life that now, as two parents, hopefully, if you are responsible, you have to deal with and address.
And that's
very deep.
That is what you have to deal with in all of your children. That's why we're saying, in addition, we see it with our physical children, but in addition to the physical children, you do have spiritual children. You do have emotional children, because the idea of creation is happening in the Trinity. So when we're saying a man and a woman are coming together, we're having sex, and there's something that is created there. So when you do get up, you have to say, what was created? Was it love? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it neglect? Was it hiding? Like, what am I actually using the sex for? Because those are all of your emotional children that are all around. And what happens with children is that we have to nurture them. We have to take care of them. We are raising them. So over the long amount of time, you see, hey, I'm going to take my child from a baby to the age of 18. They're going to become an adult, and they are initiated into the culture of our family, the world, the community, the language, all the things that are around them. But the emotional children are getting nurtured too. They're growing up too. So you have to say to yourself, if I created this type of hostility and I had sex,
Christine.
you know, in this way that
We love you,
is,
Chris.
you know, not nurtured. I
Smith.
don't know if I can be myself. Those are the spiritual and emotional children that are running around your house, just like the physical children.
They're running around your mind and your
They
heart.
are. You're right. The house of your mind, the house of your heart, your womb. So again, all of these major points in our body. So the major, you know, this is when you're not looking at the person or at the children, they still exist. You know, they're still in your mind energy, heart energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy.
We love you, Denise.
And we always talk about the heart, but the heart.
Oh, Denise, we coming to see y'all this year. Go ahead. I'm sorry. We coming down that way.
Next year.
Next year, I meant to say.
Right.
So we already said we're gonna come see y'all. Go ahead, cousin Ronnie.
No.
So this is the reality, because I made the watch and loser point. Denise, I just wanted to send out that love. Y'all sent us so much love, and we were just talking about you all the other day. We coming to Savannah. Is it Savannah?
I'm coming to Savannah.
Nawasha's coming to do a women's retreat and a workshop.
And we are going to
in Savannah, and
hang
I'm
out
going to be
in
there.
the state of Georgia.
Yes, and I'm going to be there, and we are going to make sure that we come see y'all.
Yes.
Ronnie, what's up, cousin Ronnie? Peace, Angelo. So, you
But
know,
anyway, we were
I
talking
want to
about
say
the
something to
emotion.
men. Let's talk about the men and women, because I want to give men two things. I want to give them the dietary requirements of sexual virility.
Mm-hmm.
So remind me to get to that, because I want to tell men something.
Let's just do it now.
Okay, let's do it right now. Virility in men. Here is again the problem with the reason we're always talking about culture. Like, you know, we put up a post today about emotional immaturity and people not really understanding what a cultural initiation does. And you go through several cultural initiations as you develop through your 7/7s. We have gone through many. We are going through some now and looking forward to going through many. Some are years long, some are several months, what have you. But this virility issue with men, we are being tricked into, we're being killed by these erectile dysfunction drugs. By these erectile dysfunction drugs, because these are drugs that are actually attacking our body filter systems, which are the kidneys and the liver.
So you're giving up your kidneys and liver.
You're giving up your kidneys and liver, which are the things that filter all toxins in your body for an erect penis. Now, it's problematic because I have seen brothers who take these things regularly, and really, it's really just a dietary issue. I know a lot of men who say they work with Dr. Sabi or Dr. Africa, even Queen Afua, who has reversed their impotency and stuff like that. Because a lot of us, if you have an American diet, you're impotent. Even if you have regular erections, you're impotent compared to what you could be. And that goes for me. That goes for everybody who's eating the BAD, B-A-D, the Black American diet. But especially for men, this is what you have to understand. Most of the diet that we eat in America is effeminized. We're eating the female animals. For those of us that eat meat, I do not eat meat, but for those that eat meat, some of the fishes, the shrimps, the lobsters, chicken, definitely, beef, they're all female foods, and their hormones are hyper induced. And so what you're getting is a hyper induced female diet. Milk is the serum from the female. And this is why when you look at a lot of times brothers from the islands who have this mythos that they're very virile, and women look for brothers in the islands, because they're not eating the cow, the female, they're eating the oxen. They're eating the male, and they're actually, the roots that they're taking are the sorrel and some of the other things that they drink, where over here we might drink sodas or we're into chocolate milk or strawberry milk and all of these different things that really effeminize us. And so we have a feminine diet, and then we go into the sex act trying to be a real man. And then when we add the heavy mucus diet that clogs our pores, there's a myth, and Dr. Africa deals with this very, very well in African Holistic Health, but also in the course that we took, about the myth of who is the sexual aggressor. So the feminine sex organ is a muscle. So it can contract and, release like an arm. Our physical member is really like the nose, or more specifically, it's like the ear that fills up with blood and gets hard, but it's not actually a muscle. It's tissue. And so if your diet is mucus based, you not only are you producing acid sperm, which is something that we talk about,
that you're giving to the woman.
The reason black women have so many cysts is really coming from the men that they're having sex with, and not necessarily them. So they're becoming the waste, the trash can of our families, because they're eating bad as well, but then they're taking the waste in the sperm. Soy milk is another one, but it's just milk in general, chicken, bread, and bread comes in the form of crackers, cookies, pretzels, all of the things that we call different names. They're all in the body. That's all bread. And what it does is it creates mucus, and then the blood flow is limited, so you can't get a full erection. So now you take this other poison that your body cannot filter. You have an erection for 20 minutes, but slowly but surely, the thing that is going to continue to help you deal with these toxins is being eroded. And so when you compare the Black American man to, just say, brothers from the continent or brothers in the islands, you see a different virility. If you have an honest conversation, and women will tell you, women who have dealt with brothers here and who have dealt with brothers on the continent, or who have dealt with men who are meat eaters and, have a bad American diet, versus men who are cleansed and living an alkaline vegetarian diet, you will see the difference. But here's the 5 things that men need for their virility. They need chromium, they need potassium, they need selenium, they need magnesium and zinc. And for those of us that have gray or any of that, anytime you're graying, you gray on your face, you gray on your pubic hairs, under your arms, wherever, on your head, you're losing zinc. And zinc is connected to our ability to deal with stress. So when we output a lot of zinc, we start to go gray. So I know a lot of us brothers, we kind of use that as a badge, and they say gray is wisdom because of the stress. But a lot of things that we say is natural is actually, a lot of things that we claim are normal are actually unnatural. So we all go gray, and a lot of it, I started going gray at 14 years old. If you know me, you know that I started this patch of gray right here when I was 14 years old because of the stress that I was dealing with. And a lot of my friends were like, what the hell is going on with you? You're like, Rogue, you're going gray. But I was dealing with trauma. And
those are, again, like when something's manifesting on the physical level, it's already been through all the levels that we were talking about, just like sex. Right. So this is your, I don't want to say warning, but it's your physical,
it's a warning.
It's a physical acknowledgement if you're saying that this is what's happening at the sexual level. Right. So like where you get gray also points to different things. So like really saying that you're looking at yourself to understand and to self-diagnose. It's just like, I know when I had my children, part of losing hair when you are at like postpartum hair loss happens for me at the area of my head that represents reproduction. So a lot of times women lose their hair right here and right here because that's where you've been holding on to your hair while you were pregnant, and then as your hormones adjust, you lose hair again. But you have this big change in your reproductive area, so that's where you start to lose hair. So sometimes the the signals that we're getting in the physical, like whether or not it is impotence, frigidity, hair graying, hair loss, those are a physical manifestation of what's already been happening on a spiritual, emotional, and mental level. So these are the times for us to say, there's another way, or there's a deeper issue that I need to address if I have this physical manifestation. But a lot of times we're also living in a culture that implies the best thing for us to do is to get rid of problems or symptoms of problems very quickly.
Get rid of symptoms.
And to do it with medication. So we're used to narcotics. So we have drugstores all around us. And what we say is, I have this problem. I really still want to have sex. So I'm just going to go get a pill that will give me an erection for 8 hours. But then you're looking like that's great. And you're feeling like, oh, I can be a porn star, but the woman is still not having an orgasm.
You're sitting around with an empty shotgun.
And it's expensive. And like we said, how much was Viagra going for by the pill? When Viagra was the big one, it was pretty expensive, on the street.
It came way down.
It did, because there are other ones. There are better ones
on the street. Levitra and all that. Listen.
So anything can be sold on the street.
They had a drug trade going with that thing. They were selling that thing.
But the idea is we're relying on this external, stimulant thing or whatever it is, in order to get us back to what would be natural, what would be easy, what would be, fluid and a beautiful, fulfilling experience. We're kind of like left in a lot of categories of unfulfilled.
But this is so all of this is connected to casual sex.
So that was just your one point, right?
If you're not following it, so my point was the dietary thing,
right?
And then my second point was the social stigma around sexuality. And this fake idea that we have to perform like some mandingo and just the way that we're approaching sex. Baba Haru said that, we approach sexuality like our women's walls are like we tan in leather. So like if you see how people tan leather, and that's the way a lot of us are
and
approaching.
And that's another reason that women have physical challenges.
Yeah, fibroids and various other things. Is just the way we approach it. We've been taught to that sex is synonymous with beating, because we were taught sex culturally as a group. The blacks that I'm talking to now here, our social conditioning is coming from the enslavement process. So every sexual act was an act of aggression and beating. So I remember being a young person in watching pornography, and I was saying to some of my friends, like, because we used to watch it in groups, like when we were in our teens, it'd be like 5 or 6 of us. So, we going over Steve's house to watch this Insatiable video. And we used to be like, yo, why are they hitting the women like that? You know what I mean? Like why are they just like out of nowhere? Like, and what we learned later is it's filler activity, because you're not performing or whatever the case may be. It's hard to stay focused when there's 100 cameras and lights around and stuff like that. So the man is just doing stuff that is actually visually graphic. And so he's just smacking the woman around. And grabbing her face, right? and stuff like that. You don't realize
that until you're older and you have your own sexual experience, and somebody's like, "What are you doing?"
And then now what's really sad is when the women take on that energy and profess to really like that. And I always say, when you compare, Ronnie had said earlier about we are normalizing dysfunction and making it functional. When you're able to compare the extremes, it is the only time you're able to make a clear decision. When you're able to look at the dirty glass of water next to the clean glass of water, and then if you say the dirty glass of water is what's best for me, then that's a certain mentality. And I would look at I would challenge, what is it that you're valuing? What is your internal value system? But a lot of times we say we love something, but it's a lot of times in the absence of the polar opposite. So many people have come to love this hyper casual, violent sex style, but they don't really have an example of a nurturing, loving style, which is not just soft. It's strong, it's hard, it's forceful too, but it's in a loving way. It's not necessarily done like I'm whooping your ass in the sex act, to the point where people are saying, beat me, and I'm gonna beat you. You know what I mean? And so you get into the sadomasochistic and all of those other deviations that we get into, that I don't get into, but that people get into, as a group, that we get into that stuff. And, I've come across those people and I've been like, damn, I'm bugging, because I don't even know who this person is like that. And I'm in a sex act with them and they, wow. And I didn't realize that. And I'm really not enjoying this, but now I felt like my ego is at risk in my manhood. And so now I'm involved in something that is corny to me. And I'm looking at you like, yo, I'm bugging, because you who I'm dealing with. And, so I grew up and we're looking for you to do the same. So those are the two things I had for the men. Peace.
Do you have anything for the women?
For the women, I would just say, that the casual sex is really a male-dominated thing. A lot of women are saying that they're doing casual sex because they've been like that borrowed misogyny. When you hear women saying, I don't have any female friends and things like that, that's not really a woman's ideology. It is the negative imagery that men have of women that women are adopting. So whenever I see a woman, when you talk about the science and the artistry of a man or a woman, casual sex doesn't serve anything. But especially when I see a woman saying she's into casual sex. I just saw somebody say, can friends have sex? And a whole bunch of women were saying, oh yeah. As long as they don't put their feelings into it and all of that. And come on. Like, what is it that you are into, black woman, that you don't want some feeling into? What we have deteriorated bad, y'all, and we are striving really hard to fool ourselves, but it ain't working. You know what I'm saying? So when you talk about,
I think your gauge of your level of fulfillment is where you should be monitoring. So a lot of times you're not really fulfilled in what you're doing, whether that's work, spirituality, food. You're not really fulfilled, but what you say that you love and what you even engage in repeatedly is just what you maybe used to be fulfilled with, what you thought was going to be fulfilling. It ends up being in a space that's not even tangible. So here we are, we're talking about something that is physical, but a lot of times we're going into it with, you don't have a physical fulfillment. So now you're settling. What I would say to a lot of women is, many times I hear the conversation that we are settling. So we're settling for what we think is out there, and that is what man is available, what I'm actually going to get from that man. So now I have to tell myself that is what I want, because that's the only option that there is. But what happens is, the mind is so amazing that I always tell, my students, like, have you ever lost your cell phone or lost your keys, right? Or so you think. And you're like, oh, I don't know where my keys are. I can't find my keys. I lost them. They could be right in front of your face. My mom used to say all the time, if I say, I don't know where it is, she would say, okay, if I find it, then what? What do I get? Or, what's going to happen when I come in and find it? Because I'm telling you that it's in your room. I'm telling you that it's in your book bag. I'm telling you exactly where it is. But when you're in your mind saying, this doesn't exist, I can't find this, I don't see it, I've lost it, you will actually go right past it. And someone else could be like, oh, I see a phone right there. I see keys right there. I see a red pen right there on the table. And as far as you're concerned, it didn't even exist because you couldn't observe it. So we talk about this on a spiritual level or an indigenous level, that what you actually are seeing or recognizing is an in sync vibration. So when you're looking at what you can see, something is resonating with the vibration of your eye. When you're listening to what you can hear, something is resonating with the vibration of your ear. So when you are walking past something that you see, that you don't see on the table, but it's right there that another person can see, it's almost as though it doesn't exist for you. So if the red pen is on the table, but you're like, I don't see a red pen, I don't see a red pen. You're telling yourself that it doesn't exist, that there isn't one.
In psychology, they call it a scotoma. They call it a scotoma, like it is present, but you've convinced yourself that it is not. So your mind refuses to see it.
And the idea in physics or quantum physics is the idea of, is something, is it non-locality? Is it, how are you connected to this other thing?
Non-locality.
That things don't exist until you look at them.
Oh.
So the idea that everything exists at the same time and then nothing exists until you need to resonate with it or perceive it. But the idea is, I think a lot of times we as women, we're creative, we're passionate, we're hurt maybe and a little cynical. So what happens is we say, hey, this is what the men want. They want the best porn star. They want, I think we really see it in our culture with like, slut walks and this idea of glorifying, stripper culture and slut culture. It's the idea that you're saying, this is what a man wants. This is what they're throwing their money at. So now this is what I want. But you're not necessarily saying why you want it, how you came to want it, or any of the things that we're talking about. Like, what's your first experience? When did you really want to be a slut? When you were younger. But what you're saying now is that this is what is powerful. So like we said before, the trick of the most amazing thing about you is your sexual energy, and that you can be the temptress. That is the most amazing thing you have to offer anywhere in the world. So it's a powerful thing, but not your wisdom attached to it, not your creativity attached to it, not your intellect or curiosity or, governance or discernment attached to it. It's just the fact that you're an amazing object to look at. And I'm not even like looking at you from a distance. I'm manipulating your ability to be beautiful and your ability to be the temptress. So now you can sell this. You're selling fulfillment. You're selling excitement. You're selling. So when you're saying, hey, I want to be a stripper, I can come home with $1,000 a day. That's really powerful for some people, because now you're associating money with power. You're associating the fact that, hey, I was going to get grabbed anyway. I was going to get called out of my name anyway. I was going to get, someone trying to throw me some cash anyway. I'd rather be in control of it. And I know, I've never been a stripper, but when I was younger, I did babysit for a woman who was a dancer. And she used to call me over in my college years to babysit her, to watch her 2-year-old. I believe the child was 2, turning 3. And I would watch the child at like around 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night to overnight. And the woman would really come home and crack open a cash box and pay me. And I used to be like, wow, she did come home with $1,000 a night. So you worked like 3 or 4 nights when you really wanted to. Sometimes you worked 2 nights, but she was going to school and paying for school and, providing for her child, and felt that this is what she had to do. And she was saying, I'm going to do this at a limited time. But I used to be saying, like, she went out and made $1,000 while I sat here and made it like $100. Right. So I'm watching her child for her and made like 10%.
Well, that's what starts to sway people's
exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Their morality.
That's the same thing that happens with women and even men or women. And I mean, when you look at who's working in pornography, right? So when you say the young woman is working in pornography, chances are she didn't want to be a porn star when she was younger. You know what I mean? Those are the odds that she was not a little girl saying, I want to be a porn star. That's so right. I think a lot of times when we were also having a conversation about
that's right.
What does it mean to be a child prostitute? Or like a lot of the times that we have these words about the woman, like I know Mansha was talking about watching pornography and realizing that maybe a porn star was like 18
Right.
And 21, and you're like, wow, this girl, this woman did this job for 5 years, 10 years, and she's a superstar in this industry. But when she started, she was only 18.
Right.
So if I looked at another 18-year-old, perhaps she wanted the money, the freedom, but why did she want to use this, way of using her sex and her idea of the temptress? Why is she using it like this? And sometimes why is she using it like this with men who are older or men who are, in a certain kind of position?
Right.
You don't want to look at necessarily maybe the 40-year-old woman, or you're not necessarily hey, we're having sex and we just want to see sex between a married couple. The scenario is often like, I'm looking for a younger girl. I'm looking just for her body. And then this leads into,
and you're also looking for someone you can dominate.
Right.
That's essentially what it comes down to.
The dominance is what I was just going to talk
about. That's why she's younger.
It's also, a distortion of a lot of things. So we're saying casual sex, but it leads to the distortion to you saying that there's a child prostitute. So we talked about that and traveling all over the world. And then also young girls who get married, who are married by their parents, essentially. Right. You're 8, you're 11, and all over the world there are young girls marrying 30-year-old men, 40-year-old men, 50-year-old men.
She's leaning.
So it's this idea of, I know when I used to say I loved being in Brazil. So I see my minha irmã, she's just came on. I used to be in Brazil. I would tell somebody that I went to Brazil. So I'm telling someone from the United States that I went to Brazil. One of the first things they would talk about is women. Right? So sex, going on vacation to have sex. Right. Because the women are beautiful.
Remember they called Newt Gingrich coming back with
the Viagra.
100 Viagra. They call him coming back with 100 Viagra. So what did he go over there and do? Ew.
But
Newt Gingrich, he was over there. Ew. That's so
the
nasty.
idea is you're taking advantage of women. So I used to say to a lot of times, there was an article in a magazine about going on these vacations to the Dominican Republic and to Brazil just to assault women.
Right. They
but
call
what
them
you would say
sex stations.
Is, hey, I'm going there and the woman wants to go out with me. She's at the bar, she's waiting, and again, she might be 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, right? And what you're saying is, somebody could have made $100, $500 all month. And now here you are as this, I'm coming from the developed world to this third world country, and all the lies that you tell yourself because you're not really developed and there is no third world country. But you're saying that you're going to go there, you're going to go to the bar, and then you're going to flash $200 to this woman who might need to support her family, who might need to make a contribution, who might have children of her own, but you're acting like she's asking for that. So you're going to the Dominican Republic, you're going to Asian countries, you're going to Brazil, and you're like, hey, there's child prostitutes outside. There is no child prostitute. No child is, again, no child wants to be a prostitute. That's a destitute situation. And I think that it's, again, the focus is on, it's the child's fault, it's the woman's fault, instead of I'm having sex with a child. So I'm a pedophile. That's not the conversation. It's that, hey, I'm on vacation to have sex in this country. And that could be Malaysia, Thailand, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Mexico, wherever you say you're going. You're taking your money to go have sex with a child. And it's a 16-year-old girl, a 14-year-old girl, an 18-year-old girl. But the focus is not on you. As saying that this is what I want, area, and this is what I'm paying for.
News. Her family was.
The focus is on the girl, and this is a child prostitute, and this is what I think when we put sex in the category of being casual, or we put this interaction, the responsibility for the interaction is on somebody else. Then this is how it's a slippery slope, as they say, between what is just deviant cultural behavior, and then what ends up being, I'm marrying a child, I'm having children with a child, especially when you're talking about these vacations that are for casual sex. You're sometimes leaving children in other countries. So I know I watched a documentary, I want to say, I don't know if it was Vietnam, it was an Asian country, but there was a whole group of children that were born to women that men were saying, I just was with a prostitute. So I came from Europe, I came from the United States, I stayed here for 3 weeks, I fathered a child and I left. I mean, I didn't even know I fathered a child, but I left and went home. And now these women were raising their children together, but they have no ability to work. They have no support. And all of the children, they might have had one photo. It's such an interesting documentary. I'm going to post that one too in the comments. But the children had photos of like a cell phone photo or something like that of their mom and this guy, and maybe a first name. And they're like, the children were hanging on to, my dad's name is Jim and he's from Australia. My dad's name is, David and he's from the United States, and my dad is from Belgium. And you can tell that the child is, a blend of whatever Asian culture that they're in, and this either European or Black American, Black European person, that the child looks different. So the child is pointed out, in culture. But I think that this is, again, like the attitude of I can go anywhere in the world and have casual sex leads to, again, the two purposes of sex. You're sometimes creating children, just like we see with wars, right? At different times, there's been a baby boom because men are in different parts of the world creating a generation of children. So I think it's just something for us.
That's actually a war technique.
It is. And now we're using it for fun.
Yeah.
But now we're saying to ourselves,
but the warmongers use that.
This is a plan that I can take a sex vacation. This is just, talk about casual. This is just like, I'm going to go skydiving. I'm going to go sailing. I'm going to take a nature walk. I'm going to go to this country and look to have sex with a couple of people. And some of the men actually did keep in touch with a couple of the women. Like maybe if this documentary highlighted 50, maybe 2 or 3 came back, for the next year's sex vacation and found out they had a baby with this woman. And some of them gave money and some of them said, wow, I didn't know this, but a lot of them were not trying to come back. And a lot of them were like, hey, I didn't ask her to have the baby, and a whole bunch of other stuff that the children were really suffering. And they were learning how to say, Dad, this is who I am, and Dad, I love you, in English and in all of these different languages that were not their first language, in order to hopefully they participated in the documentary to show their father's photo with their mother.
Yeah, it is disgusting.
Just to be able to say, hey, can you, maybe if you see this, you will come back for me. Because I feel out of place here without a father. I feel out of place being half European or half American, and I'm suffering as a child. So now we're going to have a child, again, like talking about how are you introduced to sex. Some of the girls grew up to become prostitutes again, because that's all that that's what they knew their mother to do. So like we have these kinds of cycles those are some extremes of sex vacations, but the same thing happens when we're talking about how we are having children in the United States and how we are very casual about our sexual energy and our sexual expression.
So let me say this about casual sex to close out. This is what I recognize from maturing as a man sexually and culturally and spiritually, emotionally through initiation. And I want to say this. You had asked me what did I have to say to women. And I really didn't have much. I wanted to talk to the men. I'm on some new shit where I'm not even trying to talk to black women. I am so tired of hearing black men mansplain to black women.
Yes.
Especially these cultural black men. We got a lot of work to do with ourselves. So let's just talk to each other. So I invite all men coming in this next Roman Greco calendar year of 2018. Or the 6,000 year that we're in with the Nile Valley, or whatever calendar year you dealing with. You deal with all of them. They layered on top of each other. But please stop talking to black women about what they're not doing, black men. Let's just keep all that focus for 1 year on each other. Let's tell each other what we're not doing. Let's support each other, but let's tell each other where we need to work, and then, be an agent for change, especially all you boisterous ones that have a lot of information. Let's be an agent for change. But one thing I know about casual sex and the comparison thing, because when you can compare something, honestly, you can see which one is best for you. If you make love to a person who you love, casual sex never compares to that. And the other thing that I would say about myself and about women, when you have a deep emotional attachment, a deep emotional intimacy, the way you make love is so different. I remember being infatuated with a woman who was just very, very, this was many years ago in my early 20s. So like over 20 years ago. And meeting her and coveting her and really wanting to deal with her. And I was able to see early on that she didn't have a lot of emotional depth about like self-love. And when you don't have, I'm not talking about the memes and all of that shit that you see today. I'm talking about a real self-love in action. What I do versus what I do not do. What I say versus what I do not say. Not necessarily what I present. And what I saw was she had a very cynical mother and a mother who was on her in terms of, always telling her where she didn't measure up. Well, the girl didn't have a lot of emotional depth. And when we got into the sex act, it wasn't a place that you have to be able to go deep into an emotional place of health, pull that out and share that. When you're having casual sex, a lot of times you can't access that. If you could access that, you wouldn't be having casual sex because you would understand and you would have the experience, the emotional experience of sex being very, very special and it not being something that you would do casually. So I found that to be true. Now, I parallel that with the relationship that I'm in now, with somebody who has a deep, 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 deep self-love, a deep, deep, deep self-appreciation, has boundaries, has a clearness in their heart, and a willingness to share that. It just doesn't compare. And so I would just close out on saying that casual sex is one of the most illusion-based tricks that you could ever play on yourself. And you would do it to yourself. You would definitely be influenced by other things, people, places, and things, but ultimately it's something that you do to yourself. And so people who have casual sex, you are hurting yourself and tricking yourself in the most vile way. And so we want to be here to help you if you are a person who wants to come out of that. Even those who mean very well and they enter into sex without a methodology of building a relationship, we want to help you to have your sexuality in a way that you are building a strong relationship. And so that's what we want to offer to you.
So you can use the link that we're posting, and you can just type in it's bit.ly, so a bit.ly/soulmate strategy session to book a free consultation about any relationship goal or any relationship challenge. And we just want to leave you with remembering that there is no such thing as casual sex. That really there is a spiritual, emotional, physical, mental aspect and to your exchange, and cultural aspect to your exchange, and to keep those things mindful when you are looking to engage, when you do engage, when you're coming away from the engagement, to really just take inventory of all of those things so that you can have the most fulfilling relationship when it comes to true intimacy, true love, and even the sexual power, that it can be the most fulfilling for you. So remember those areas. And is that it?
That's it. Go have some sex. Go, those of you that are in love and committed, go get it in. Use a full sensory, your thoughts, your emotions, and use all 7 senses, the colors, the sounds, the sights, the textures. Use it all to create a sexual sanctuary and go in that and exchange your deepest vulnerability with each other and get it on like we do.
And remember the word for the week, reciprocity. That's our family word for the week.
Yeah, that was our word from family meeting. The 7 virtues of Ma'at, reciprocity,
so this
the law
is
of magnetism.
Giving and receiving. You know, a lot of times with casual sex, you're just looking to get and not to give, or you're looking to give and you're not balanced with giving and receiving. So you want, you want reciprocity even in your sexual experience. And
I want some reciprocity.
On that note,
brothers, go get some reciprocity, black man. Get your reciprocity.
Inbox or
y'all
a message.
Already, Sutherland Pollock. Thank you for riding with us, Queen.
Anything else that you would like to talk about in relationships, just drop us a message. If you see something that's interesting or something comes up in your own relationship that you are interested in the spiritual, cultural, mental, emotional, physical perspective on, we would love to talk about what you want to talk about.
The art and science of black love.
See you next Monday.
So next Monday, 9 o'clock, the black love reigns. Yes. Until then, as always, we greet you in peace and say, Nia Akoma Hotep.